Welcome to the Cartoonist Kayfabe courtroom. My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We threatened that last week's Jim Shooter episode was the last one. This one definitely will be, man. When we run up to an hour, it gets a little long in the tooth, but we don't have very many pages left of this testimony from Jim Shooter in a court of law, in front of a jury of his peers, as an expert witness, skewing towards the Michael Fleischer side of the argument against Fantagraphics and Gary Groth. Early in the testimony, he's asked by probably like Fleischer's lawyer all those kind of softball questions, teeing things up to make Fantagraphics seem like they were in the wrong, and to also make Jim Shooter seem like he was a faithful expert on the subject. So for the past couple of episodes, people were asking, what's the point of this cross-examination? I think a part of the point, and this is two cartoonists talking, pure conjecture, I think a little bit of the point of Norwick, the Fantagraphics lawyer who still represents them on First Amendment issues to this day, a little bit of it is like, well, let's get you to discredit yourself a little bit. And the courtroom is an interesting place to do that because one of the earliest argumentative techniques in the history of man is the Socratic method, which is, let me just ask you enough questions, you will become a hypocrite at a certain point. And there's a lot of objection overruled because Norwick is totally like laying it on thick with that stuff. And when Jim Shooter can't answer a simple question of, is G.I. Joe a military book? And he needs paragraphs of explanation to dance around it. I imagine as a member of the jury, you're going like, this is a Magic Beans salesman.
That was a highlight for me the last section that we did where he says, it's not a terrorist book.
And how about all that language about like running with the pack? And is Michael Fleischer part of the pack?
Yeah.
He had an opportunity to be a part of the pack, but he was discounted from the pack after his interviews came out.
Yeah, that part was bizarre. A lot of this has been bizarre. It's the whole thing that I like about it, though, is let me explain the comics industry to somebody unfamiliar with the comics industry. I'm more confused now after hearing the explanation than I was before we read this.
And I still don't have a clear understanding of the statutes of limitations on perjury law and shit like that. So when we say stuff about how the new universe is an answer to Dark Knight Returns, I have no interest in our YouTube channel of getting anybody jammed up with legal troubles themselves, man. But it really feels like we're telling on somebody when I have to read that statement. It's
my favorite bit of promotion in this interview. Like, what's the best-selling book in years and years and years? Our new book is just like it.
And last go-round, which, by the way, all the previous pieces of this testimony are in the description below this video right now. Another piece that I dug was he was mentioning how writers in the direct market can skew the numbers, good or bad, with the readers, because those are the smart marks, are the ones that go to the comic specialty shops. And he didn't give a name to the writer, but he said there was one writer who can really skew numbers in a big way. And there was a lot of back and forth in the comments about who that might have been. One of the people mentioned a couple of times, I believe was Stan Lee would be that writer who'd be able to skew the numbers in a big way. I wonder if that's who he had in mind, but that wasn't a valid course of conversation in the testimony that was given last time. So
my argument is it's got to be Frank Miller. And the reason is, you could point at something like the Daredevil run that he comes back to that Mazzucchelli draws and see if those numbers spiked.
Right.
And then, of course, you can look at what he's doing, which would be like Batman Year One and Dark Knight Returns, which I believe both sold very well. So, I don't know. That would be my guess if I were betting on who the writer is at that time. There may be others, but I'm thinking from Jim Shooter's point of view, like somebody that he would have had at least some numbers with a Marvel title that he could associate with them.
I think one of the most, several of the most enthusiastic members of the viewing audience for these specific videos are my publishers at Dear Fantagraphics, who after every video send us voluminous email.
I love those, by the way. Gary, Mike, keep those coming. Those are very enjoyable for me.
I wonder if I know that the great Mark Palm, who worked at the warehouse at Fantagraphics, he's moved on to greener pastures to keep making Outlaw comics and things, and I wonder if he's still somehow tangentially affiliated. There's a Kayfaber within the Fantagraphics splinter cell. There's a Kayfabe splinter cell within the Fantagraphics organization, and somebody went out to the shed and pulled out all the court transcripts, depositions, 1,000-page Gary Groth deposition that took a week to compile, and the depositions, like, from what I understand with people.
By the way, this is what I want to see Aaron Sorkin adapt.
Yeah.
Give him that 1,000 pages of deposition from Gary Groth and turn that into a little drama that we can watch.
People who I've known who've had like arbitration and depositions and stuff, it's the one opportunity where you're like you're not sworn, like you're not in court, so you don't have to be pleasant, and you could really like look at that person who's accusing you or defending themselves, and you could say everything that you feel. Basically, it could work against you once you go into the thing, but you could be more yourself, you could be more legit. And from what I understand, those depositions, very, very spicy.
I bet.
1,000 pages, Uncle Gary.
Yeah, he said it was like a week long, right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine going through this.
That's
kind
9
of
to
like,
5 days.
Like being like focused and on for a week of this.
That's
unbelievable. I can barely read an hour of this without being like, all right, I got to decompress. Yeah, it's intense stuff.
Those lawyers had the meter running. So the way this works is Jimmy plays the court bodies, man. The judge, all lawyers. So you're going to hear him say last names, overruled, another last name, sustained, things like that. I'm playing specifically Jim Shooter. And if you're all caught up, if you're ready to go, if you have nothing more to say, the jury left the courtroom while all the lawyers had some bickering to do, because things were getting testy with some of the back and forth where Lyons was definitely trying to jam up Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter was very frazzled.
Yeah, we had Lyons and one of Shooter's comments with a "thank you, Mr. Shooter," and an objection from Shooter's lawyer at the "thank you."
Right.
Yeah, man, they're fighting over everything at this point. So that is the end of the day, and I'll pick up if you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right, so open court, jury present, the court. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. One of the jurors is sick, so we will be proceeding with 8 jurors, and we will now have the redirect examination of Mr. Shooter. The redirect examination by Mr. Marshall, again, Mr. Marshall being Jim Shooter's lawyer, coming back to do damage control, maybe?
The Fleischer guy.
Marshall. Do you recall the occasion, Mr. Shooter, when you first met me in person?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall where it was that we met?
It was in my office.
As you sit here today, you can remember the situation and the conversation, the subject of the conversation at that meeting?
Yes, I can.
What issues or what matters was it that I approached you with when I inquired as to whether you could be an expert witness in this case?
You wanted to know if I could testify to the impact on the place that Comics Journal had within the industry, whether or not it had people's ears and so forth, and you wanted to know the impact or the presence that Harlan Ellison had in the industry.
Did I initiate with you, did I bring up any other subjects by way of inquiry that I wanted you to testify as an expert witness about?
No, you just wanted to know if my position was really... You wanted to help to describe my position at Marvel.
Who was it who brought up the whole subject matter of damages to Michael Fleischer and damages to Michael Fleischer's reputation and to his ability to sell in the industry?
I did. Can I just call a quick conjecture? Like, this is a fresh day of testimony, and I feel like there's no doubt that Marshall and Shooter had dinner that night after that initial testimony that we left last week, and are going over everything that's going over here. You say this, you say that. If this doesn't feel kayfabe to every jury member, when this like it's
This is the NFL game where the coordinator, they script the first 15 plays of offense.
Right.
Like, you're going in here, this is our game plan, Jim, and then I don't know, we'll see how it goes.
Attention Kayfabers, we need your help to support our comics making habits. We are both Eisner Award-winning cartoonists, and this is what's available from us at the moment. Ed Piskor's Red Room, the Antisocial Network, the trade paperback collection of the first 4 issues of the graphic, violent masterpiece Red Room, the Outlaw Comics contemporary masterpiece. This is 200 pages, so in addition to a very nice production job on the actual comics reproduced in this collection, there's also some great back matter, including the first draft, kind of the writing in comics form of the first draft. Dude, this is the most valuable stuff in my life. Whenever I was a kid and I would find like glimpses of this, absolutely love that you included this in the collection. There's also notes from Ed on some of the details of this story, some behind the scenes stuff, pencils. So a really nice collection. The other piece of Red Room that you guys need to put on your calendar is March 9th, Red Room Trigger Warnings issue number 1 will be in comic book stores. Due to some ransomware issues, this may be the most rare issue of Red Room. So you want to pick this up whenever you see it on March 9th. Tell your local comic shop to set one aside for you. And there are some cool variants. This is your main cover, and should tell you pretty clearly what this issue is all about, what you've got in store for yourself whenever you pick this up. But here's my variant, an homage to Zap Comics, the Robert Crumb classic.
a lot of people are watching this on their phones, man, and they comment on your prolapsed anus, but that's really a rat.
That is a rat. That's classic, classic torture kind of techniques there.
Yeah.
I first learned about these in Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, and I think he learned about it from possibly the CIA. So nothing new there, not reinventing the wheel. Peach Momoko, Cottage Industry, as you say, Ed, with another beautiful entry in her Red Room variant covers. And your own variant, as you described it, sort of a more book-like take on the on this cover design. So if you guys are watching out there, like I said, heads up, these are going to be scarce. So pick up any Red Room trigger warning number ones that you see when you see them if you want a copy. Coincidentally, my first comic book is coming out March 16th, Hulk Grand Design Monster. This will be available wherever you buy comic books, and please pre-order these. Let your comic shop know that you want one of these. It is 500 issues of Incredible Hulk, 40 years of history, distilled down into 2 oversized issues that will be out in March 16th and then in April. And you're going to want these, the perfect jump-on point for longtime Hulk fans or first-time Hulk readers. And like I said, let your comic shop know that you want them so that they can pre-order these books. And these come in a variety of nice covers. In addition to my cover, we've got one by cartoonist Kayfabe's own Ed Piskor, doing a fantastic homage to both Todd McFarlane and the first appearance of Wolverine with this original costume by Romita and Herb Trimpe. Man, I dig that comic. This is one of those ideas that when I see it, I'm a little bit jealous that I didn't think of. That's a really good idea.
You've got plenty of good ideas in Hulk Grand Design. I read it.
Marcos Martin doing the Hulk transformation. Pretty fun there. I don't know how many of the versions of this I've drawn in the last year, but the classic transforming into the Hulk. And, of course, Peach Momoko, who we've already mentioned and probably needs no introduction to comics fans out there, doing a really cool She-Hulk and Hulk. And these are available in pre-order. These are not retailer exclusives, so order one of them, order a set of all 4 of them, pick the one you like best, whatever works for you, but tell your local comic shop to order one. Let's show Marvel what the Kayfabe effect is all about.
Back to the game.
All right, so you just said I do, and back to Marshall. What is your opinion about that? Holmes, objection. Foundation. Norwick, objection. Court, read the previous question. Record read. Court, I'll sustain the objection on the ground that I don't understand the Foundation question. Marshall, could I speak briefly to that? Court, you may not speak to it. You have a witness on the stand. You may ask him another question. Marshall, you testified yesterday on cross-examination that in your view, Court, next question. Marshall, what is it that Michael Fleischer now has a reputation for being a writer in? What sphere, what area of comics?
I believe that now Michael is thought of as having a very narrow range of writing horror and terror type stories.
What, in your view, is the range that Michael Fleischer is competent or good?
My experience with Michael tells me that he's a very capable writer. He's a good fundamental writer. He can write almost anything. There are certain areas where he'll do a little better than other areas, and that's true of any writer. I think his range is very broad.
This is Lyons. In your view, what is the basis or the reason why his reputation is for a much narrower range? Norwick. Objection. Holmes. Objection. Court overruled.
I think that the basis for his reputation is the Harlan Ellison interview in the Comics Journal and all of the subsequent expansions of that and argumentative furtherings of that case against him that took place thereafter.
Holmes. Move to strike the answer on the grounds that it is not relevant to Ellison. Court. I take it that this testimony is offered only with respect to Fantagraphics and Groth. Is that correct, Mr. Marshall? Marshall. Your Honor, I think the first part of the answer goes, Court. I am not going to split it up. You are either offering it against both or you are not. Marshall. I will offer it just against Fantagraphics, Your Honor. There came a time, did there not, Mr. Shooter, when Michael Fleischer wrote one of the Conan series for Marvel?
Yes.
And that was beginning sometime in 1980.
I think.
Would you explain to us how it is, or exactly why it is, that the sales of Conan after Mr. Fleischer took it over increased in the newsstand section of the market and decreased in the so-called direct market or the comic specialty store market? Norwick. Objection. Holmes. Objection. Court. Is that what happened, that sales increased in the news market and decreased in the direct market?
Slight decrease in the direct market, yes.
Court. Overruled.
Well, as I tried to explain before, the newsstand market is about 40,000 dealers, newsstands, 7-Elevens, places like that serviced by about 400 wholesalers. The distribution is done on a consignment basis. It is very haphazard, very inefficient. The books might be put out 1 month and might not be put out 1 month. This tends to appeal to people who are more casual readers, people who, if passing by their newsstand and see a cover that catches their eye, see the name Conan, will buy the magazine. Good quality stores, good quality material will cause slow growth because people will go back to the newsstand and look for those things, start looking for them rather than sort of casually picking them up. And the direct market orders, there's not a comma where there should be, in the direct market, orders are firm. The orders are in advance. From Marvel's point of view, it is 100% efficient. There are no returns. The dealers are knowledgeable and know what they can sell. They are very much aware of writers and artists. They are dealing with a much more knowledgeable clientele, people who are interested in who is the artist, who is the writer, collectors, more serious fans. These people respond to the name. My experience in talking to wholesalers and retailers and fans found that there was a resistance to Michael's name because of his newly acquired reputation. I believe that is the reason why it dropped several thousand copies in a month in the direct market. The newsstand responded to the fact that the stories were good and sales went up.
You stated on cross-examination the names of several people, writers in the industry who you consider to be hot properties or who do sell well in the direct market. My question is, how much money, how much gross income do these people make a year? Holmes. Objection, no foundation, move to strike the comment of counsel. Court sustained. Marshall. Do you know for a fact what are the gross incomes of such people as Larry Hama, Mr. Mantlo, Mr. Chris Claremont? Norwick. Objection, relevance. Holmes. Objection, relevance, no foundation. Court. I take it you know this because these people told you?
They are my employees. I know what they make.
Court. Do you know what they are paid by you?
Those particular people work only for me.
Court. Overruled.
Should I answer?
Marshall. I believe you should. What are their incomes?
This is going to be good, Jimmy. Ready? These people, well, Chris Claremont last year made about $230,000. Bill Mantlo, $120,000. Larry Hama splits his time. He's an editor and also writes freelance. He made a bit over $100,000 writing, not including the editorial salary. I don't remember who else you said.
In your view, can Michael Fleischer ever be what you've called a hot property or a good seller in the direct market?
I think he has been severely damaged, and I think that it runs deep, and you are dealing with collectors, people who are going to be there for a long time, and I think that it will be very hard to reverse his reputation.
Would you hire Michael Fleischer for Marvel for a series that you expected or wanted to do well in the direct market?
No, I wouldn't.
Why not?
Because it would be hard to assemble a team around Michael, and because it would mean that if I had a series that I had otherwise expected that it would do well in the direct market, I think that Michael's name would cripple it.
Is there any hate or vendetta that is going on between Marvel and the Comics Journal, or between you and the Comics Journal?
No, I feel like it sort of comes with the job that you are going to get criticism from all quarters. I've always tried to let it just roll off my back. I don't respond to it. I ignore it.
No further questions of this witness, Your Honor. Recross-examination by Mr. Norwick. Norwick. Mr. Shooter, since yesterday, have you had occasion to read the Michael Fleischer interview in the Comics Journal?
No, I haven't.
Let me call attention first to the introduction that appears on page 42 and ask you to read the first 2 paragraphs of that introduction, please, to yourself. Marshall. I object to improper recross. Norwick. It goes precisely to the subject matter of the redirect, Your Honor. Court. There is no pending question. Norwick. Mr. Shooter, have you read those 2 paragraphs?
Not yet. Okay.
Norwick. Would you agree that it would be fair to conclude that those 2 paragraphs would contribute to Michael Fleischer's reputation for the range of work that he is best known for?
I think that anything in print is going to contribute. If you are asking me to judge the impact of it, I'd say not as much.
This went out to the same audience that received the Ellison interview, is that right?
I don't think it has the same weight as anything Harlan would say.
You've so testified that that was your opinion, but you have no basis for that, do you? Marshall. Objection to the question. Court. Objection sustained. Counsel's comment will be stricken. Norwick. Do you have any basis in fact, Mr. Shooter, to know how many readers of the Comics Journal read the Fleischer interview?
The basis in fact, which is the basis of my belief that more people would read the Ellison interview, is the people around me, the people at Marvel Comics, the people I contact, the people I've discussed these things with over the years. I've met many, many people who have read the Ellison interview, and very, very few who've read this, the Fleischer interview.
Or at least mentioned it to you.
Or who have mentioned it.
To your knowledge, dealers read the Comics Journal, is that right?
I think that many dealers do.
Pros read the Comics Journal.
I think many professionals.
In fact, they want to know about people who are reading comic books, don't they? The direct market types.
I think that's why they are there.
They want to know Mr. Fleischer, don't they?
Yes.
Isn't the best source of Michael Fleischer himself? Yes or no?
I think that if someone were intensely interested in learning about Michael Fleischer, they should go to the source, yes.
So they want to know as much as they can know about the people they are buying, isn't that right?
I don't think you can say they, quote-unquote, and mean the entire direct market. You are talking about a market that buys 5 million Marvel comics a month.
Michael Fleischer got a newly acquired reputation in the early part of 1980, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you are certain that no part of that reputation was derived from Michael Fleischer's interview?
I don't think there is any comparison between the impact of this and the other interview.
Other than your opinion on that subject, do you have any facts to know what impact this interview on Fleischer had? Marshall. Objection. Court overruled.
My opinion is based on my talking to the people in the business and the people I meet in the course of doing business.
Let me refer you, please, to page 51 of the Fleischer interview. Last line. I am going to read it out loud. This is Fleischer speaking. Quote, I've never tried to describe this to another person, so this may sound very Twinkie, but I get incredible feelings of exhilaration and excitement from writing. It's just the most exciting thing, and I can't imagine anyone doing anything more exciting, and I'm never, and I think this is a quality I'm proud of, I'm never afraid to reveal myself, and I'm never afraid to take risks in my writing, and if people want to think I'm a sadist because I like to kill people in my Spectre stories, they are welcome to think it. End quote. The question to you is, in your opinion, might that contribute to Michael Fleischer's reputation among direct market dealers?
As I said before, I think that anything you'd print in a magazine of this kind of circulation would have an effect. I don't think this would have much effect.
Do you think it's true that Mr. Fleischer reveals himself in his writing?
As I said before, I feel that a writer can't help but have some part of himself in everything he writes. I don't think I mean by that what you mean by this.
How about what he means by it? Do you think he was stating the truth or something false when he said that? Marshall. Objection. Court. Next question. Norwick. Do you think it's fair that people might think he was a sadist because he liked to kill people in his Spectre stories? Is that sadist?
Sadist, saddest, tomato, tomato.
Marshall. Objection. Court. Sustained. Norwick. Have you ever seen anything in print about Michael Fleischer that refers to any of his work other than his violence and his gruesome material?
I don't think I've ever seen any reference to Michael in print except in the Comics Journal, and that is indeed what they focused on, and that's kind of the point.
I take it you have never seen issue number 1 of the Comic Times. Is that right, Mr. Shooter?
I probably saw it, probably flipped through it like I do with most fanzines.
These are 2 interviews with Michael Fleischer, who wrote for you at the time. You didn't read?
Yes, I probably didn't read them. I know I didn't read them.
But if a direct dealer read them, that might influence his thinking about Michael Fleischer. Isn't that right?
As I said, I think that anything he read would influence his opinion. If you read a Care Bears story by Michael Fleischer, would you think that he is a Pollyanna? This doesn't make any sense.
Did Michael Fleischer ever write any Care Bear stories?
He wasn't working for us when we published Care Bears.
Would you have assigned him a Care Bear story if he was working with you?
I think he could probably write a good Care Bears.
But instead you gave him Ghost Rider.
Yes.
Marshall, objection. Court, any further questions? Norwick, why would it be hard to assemble a team around Michael Fleischer? Marshall, objection to improper recross. Court overruled.
Because of the incentive system, every participant in the creative team is interested very much in who else is in the creative team and what their effect on sales might be. If you are an artist, you are very much interested in having a writer whose name you know will sell copies in the direct market if you can get one. I think that Michael is perceived as a detriment. People don't want to work with him. All the people in the incentive plan, the editors, writers, pencilers, inkers, are more concerned with who the other members of the team are.
Isn't it a fact that there are people who work for Marvel who think that Fleischer's work is sick and twisted? Yes or no?
I don't know.
You've never heard anyone at Marvel comment to you that Fleischer's Spectre was sick and twisted or words to that effect? You've never heard anyone say that?
I don't think so.
Not Denny O'Neil?
I don't think so.
Did Denny O'Neil ever speak to you about Fleischer's Spider-Woman?
I spoke to Denny about Michael's Spider-Woman a number of times.
And Denny O'Neil was complaining about the fact that she's in bondage all the time?
Denny O'Neil, whereas Spider-Woman, if she was in bondage, it was because he, as an editor, desired it or encouraged it or permitted it or thought it was a good direction. Michael Fleischer was a writer for hire who was doing work at the behest of Denny O'Neil. If Denny didn't like it, he could have changed it.
Denny didn't like it. Denny wanted him off Spider-Woman. Isn't that true?
I don't recall that. I went to Denny and talked to Denny several times because that's what I do. I go to the editors, talk to them about the series, and tell them what I think they are doing wrong and how to improve things. I don't recall Denny ever coming to me.
So everything that a writer does is really attributable to the editor.
On a work-for-hire project, if the editor is assigned by Marvel, he's in charge. That's it.
If everything that a writer does is really the responsibility and attributable to the editor, and yet you have this star system where the readers follow the writers, do you see any contradiction there?
Not at all, because I didn't say that the writer doesn't contribute. We pay these guys a lot of money for a good reason, but the editor is the person who is responsible. I didn't say that the writer doesn't contribute. I didn't say that he doesn't have something to offer and is not. I think you have more freedom of expression in comics than you do in most mass media, but the editor is the person responsible. It would be ridiculous to have it otherwise. Can you picture Disney letting somebody write whatever the hell they want with Mickey Mouse?
If Fleischer's work is replete with violence and bondage and abuse of women in the first instance, that's attributable to Fleischer, is that right? Marshall, objection. Court overruled.
The editor and the writer have plot conferences. The direction of the book is discussed as well as what is going to happen in a specific issue. The writer writes a plot. Sometimes the editor will make him rewrite it. Sometimes the editor will rewrite it himself when it meets the editor's satisfaction. Then the creation of the book proceeds. It goes to the artist on through the process.
How does a writer ever develop a reputation apart from the editor? Marshall, asked and answered. Objection. Court overruled.
I don't think editors get enough credit, frankly. I think that most fans have the same assumption that you do, that it's like when you are writing a novel. Either they buy it or they don't. That's not true at all. That's an assumption that a fan or an unknowledgeable person would make. A professional would know better. The professional knows that the editor is the real person in charge. A professional would know that if a writer is writing a series, he is doing so under the direction, under the supervision of an editor.
When you use the word professional, do you include the people who own the direct market stores?
Some of them and some not. I don't know how knowledgeable they are. I think many of them have not had enough experience dealing with that.
Many of them would then attribute to Fleischer himself the violence and bondage and abuse of women that they see in his work. Marshall, objection to the form, court overruled.
Especially if Harlan Ellison said so.
Or Fleischer himself says so. If Fleischer himself says that if people want to think I'm a sadist because I like to kill people in my Spectre stories, they have no reason to think that Fleischer is making that up, do they?
I don't know what they think, but I do know they get a lot of response to Harlan Ellison's interview.
Your testimony is they won't believe Fleischer because he is not knowledgeable.
I don't think very many people would read it. I didn't read it.
And he worked for you at the time.
Yes, a lot of people work for me.
You read the back issue pages, is that right?
My name is on them, the back issue pages.
Is your name in the Fleischer interview?
I don't know, I didn't read it.
Did you look for your name in the Fleischer interview? Marshall, objection, court sustained. Back to Norwick. You mentioned hot authors. Fleischer failed you on Spider-Woman, didn't he?
Superheroine books are very, very hard to sell. It was a failure before Michael came. He didn't improve it much. We tried it with a writer of very positive reputation, Chris Claremont, and even he didn't improve it very much.
You took him off Spider-Woman?
Right.
And it had nothing to do with the Ellison interview, isn't that right?
I don't recall the exact circumstances. We probably did.
And you took him off Ghost Rider, is that correct?
I believe Michael left Ghost Rider voluntarily. I don't remember why.
Is he still doing Conan for you?
Nope.
So is it a fair summary that he didn't succeed with Spider-Woman, he didn't succeed with Ghost Rider, and he didn't succeed with Conan? Marshall, objection, asked and answered, court sustained, back to Norwick. And he's no longer doing any work for you today at all?
No.
Did you have conversations with Mr. Marshall after court yesterday?
He called me last night.
How long did you speak?
A few minutes. It was late.
Did you discuss the subject matter of your testimony this morning?
All we discussed was whether or not the Walt Simonson party, his Easter party, took place after the ads appeared in the Comics Journal for their fundraising campaign. I said yes. He said, well, he thought that those things were in 1981, so therefore wasn't the party in 1981, and I said I wasn't so sure of the date yesterday.
He didn't tell you that he wanted you to testify about his original conversations with you?
He asked me if I remembered those original conversations, and I said I did, but I already testified about that. I'd been asked about that earlier, and I said essentially the same thing.
What happened at this party in April, if it was April of 81?
It was a party.
What happened in connection with Michael Fleischer and raising money for Michael Fleischer's defense or prosecution of this case?
Michael was a guest at the party, and a number of artists were there. The subject of the lawsuit came up. People noted that the Comics Journal was doing a fundraising campaign selling t-shirts and so forth. One of the artists, I think it was Bob Layton, suggested that maybe they ought to do a benefit type at Phil Seuling's convention, raise money for Michael, and maybe also make t-shirts and things. A lot of artists agreed. People who knew Michael thought that was a good idea, and I guess they proceeded to do that. I wasn't an artist. I wasn't primarily involved.
How many people were at the party?
I don't really know. 50? I don't know. Not that many.
You participated in these conversations?
I heard what was being said, some of it. I talked to people. I was not one of the primary people.
Do you indicate your support for the effort?
I wasn't against it.
A lot of these people work for you, don't they?
Yes.
You are a very important man in the comic book business, aren't you?
I think so.
And you indicated that you had no objection to this fundraising campaign, or did you indicate that you would help in any way you could?
There was no way I could help, so that really didn't come up. I'm not an artist. It seemed fine to me. I didn't object to it.
You lent your support to it?
I didn't not lend my support.
And indeed, subsequently, you interceded on behalf of this group.
As I said, Phil Seuling apparently agreed to this. At the last minute, he changed his mind. The artists involved came to me because I was a person in authority. They thought I could talk to Phil. I took Phil aside. We talked in the hallway for a few minutes. I asked him if he would provide the space that he promised for the artists. Phil's answer was a discussion of the Ellison interview. He launched into a discussion of it. He had a lot of things to say about it.
These artists who came to you and asked you to intercede were some of the same artists who were at the party?
Bob Layton and one or two of the others.
They were some of the other people who were at the party in which this idea to raise money for Michael Fleischer was devised?
Yes.
When they came to you, they knew you had already participated in those conversations and lent your support to it?
Well, once again, you have to qualify lending my support. It was not something I was in a position to do. The journal was raising money. These people were friends of Michael's who wanted to raise money. That seemed okay. It seemed fair.
Michael worked for you at the time?
Yes.
Were you neutral about this, or did you want to help Michael?
My feeling about this is that I'm going to say what I know, and other people decide what's fair, what's right or wrong. I could tell you that I was there, and my position is that I wanted it to be fair. I assume that the court knows what it is doing.
You wanted to help Michael raise money for this case, didn't you?
I wanted Michael to have his chance.
And to do that, you helped him raise money?
I don't know what you mean by help him to raise money. I talked to Phil. Phil apparently had a great deal of respect for Harlan, and he changed his mind about having that there. All I said was, quote, Phil, you promised these guys that you could have some space, unquote. And he said, all right. He was an honorable man and gave the space.
And you volunteered all your time in this case as a civic duty and not to help Michael?
Yes, I'll tell you, I have a lot better things to do than be here.
But you are not here under any compulsion?
No, I am here because I feel I ought to be.
No further questions. Holmes. Is Mr. Chris Claremont a full-time salary employee of Marvel?
We have an arrangement. When we have a writer who is a freelance writer, but who, as it happens, works full-time and exclusively for us, we offer him an employment agreement which gives him some additional benefits. First of all, since comic book work is mostly work for hire, even freelancers are given certain benefits. They're given life insurance, major medical coverage, and if they were on staff, and all their business expenses are paid. All their materials are supplied, everything is taken care of for them. If someone is full-time and exclusive and is important to us, like Chris Claremont, we offer him an employment agreement, which is a month-to-month thing. It really is no more binding than anyone taking a 9-to-5 job. He can quit anytime he wants. We can ask him to leave anytime we want. But during the course of the agreement, which is perpetual, we can give him paid vacations, paid holidays, put him on the company savings plan. In that sense, he gets a payroll every 2 weeks. But functionally, he is a freelancer. He gets assignments the way any other freelancer gets assignments. He is credited against a quota for the assignments he turns in. A lot of people who have these employment agreements, the editors don't even know that because functionally they are freelancers.
These are like downside guarantees in wrestling, right?
Right, yeah. Pay or play.
Yeah. Okay, Holmes. Move to strike his answer as non-responsive. The question was, isn't it true that Mr. Chris Claremont is a full-time salary employee? The court. I don't know. You sat back and enjoyed the answer. I think we'll leave the answer stand. Holmes. Does Your Honor prefer that I interrupt an answer if I feel it is non-responsive? Court. I think you might have given me some indication that you didn't think I should be enjoying the answer. Holmes. Your Honor, I wouldn't interrupt your enjoyment. Mr. Shooter, isn't the arrangement with Mr. Claremont a very special arrangement with Marvel?
Not at all. Exactly standard.
Isn't Mr. Chris Claremont one of the top 3 writers in the comic book industry today?
You could say that.
Isn't it true that Mr. Claremont was put on the Spider-Woman series because Marvel hoped that Mr. Claremont's name would increase sales and make a success of the Spider-Woman series?
That's true.
Mr. Shooter, Bill Mantlo, does he still work for Marvel?
Yes.
Isn't Mr. Mantlo the writer who you determined plagiarized Mr. Ellison's story?
Yes, he was.
When did you make that determination that he plagiarized Mr. Ellison's story?
I was out of the office when that broke. Left the office. I was probably on the convention circuit. After I got back to the office, I got a phone call.
I simply asked for a date.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
The court. Read the question. Marshall. Objection, improper, recross, court overruled.
I got a call from one of my writers who pointed that out to me, and shortly thereafter, someone at Marvel got a phone call from Harlan.
When was that? Can you tell me the year?
I don't remember.
Was that in 1984, sir?
Could be.
Court. What redirect does this pertain to? Holmes. To the testimony about Mr. Mantlo and his success as a comic book writer. I am trying to establish a time frame and to put in perspective the testimony about Mr. Mantlo. Court. All right. Holmes. Is Mr. Mantlo a full-time salary employee at Marvel?
Under the same circumstances as Chris Claremont, yes.
Is Mr. Mantlo paid as an independent contractor or as an employee?
Paid as an employee.
The same with Mr. Claremont?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Hama, isn't he the creator of G.I. Joe for comic books?
Yes.
Doesn't he participate in the merchandising of the G.I. Joe series?
Not at all.
Mr. Hama is a full-time salaried employee at Marvel, is that correct?
Yes, he is.
And the G.I. Joe comic book series is extremely successful for Marvel, isn't that correct?
Yes, it is.
I believe X-Men is a Marvel comic book series.
Yes, it is.
And Mr. Claremont is the writer of that series?
Yes, he is.
Has Marvel determined that Mr. Claremont is an important factor for making that a successful series?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions. Marshal, no further questions of this witness, Your Honor. The court, thank you, Mr. Shooter. Witness excused.
I was kind of hoping for like an ending where it was like some definitive, like Jim Shooter like really jams himself up, looks real goofy, and they're like, no further questions.
Yes, exactly.
Like, you could excuse yourself right now.
The walk-off home run from the defense. I've seen the TV shows. That's how it's supposed to go.
It's some of that stuff that we've done and will do probably has that kind of energy, Jimmy, because we just wrapped up the Jim Shooter testimony, but there is Dean Mullaney testimony on this case as an expert witness in favor of Michael Fleischer. There is testimony from Harlan Ellison himself, which I can't wait to get to, Gary Groth, but there are other depositions and testimonies in other comic book court cases. We haven't done the Todd McFarlane deposition yet. That was in relation to the Neil Gaiman stuff. I'm very interested in unpacking that material. We have a Stan Lee deposition, yet another Jim Shooter deposition that is in relation to the Charles Atlas ads and Flex Metallo.
Which just seems totally bizarre. Like, how does Shooter connect to that, of all things?
He's a yenta. He's a busybody. Like, if you haven't learned from this, like,
he's a very important person in this business.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly was, man. In that moment there in 1986, 87, and those early 80s. But volunteering your time, like, very often I think people get involved in this kind of thing, thinking that it's going to not take much time out of their day. I bet you Shooter has some regret about being called to the stand and like being a part of such a kerfuffle that ain't even his business. Like, there's some underlying reason that he's doing it. He obviously didn't put it out there in the testimony. He says that he's doing his civic duty, something like this. But this guy is a chess player. First off, to be involved in that kind of hierarchy of administration within a company, you got to game the system. You got to be a player of the game. You're climbing the ladders, man. So you got to be a chess player of sorts. There's a move here, man, that has to do with, the negative reaction to Fantagraphics or something. That is his reason for participating. But I don't think he was like thinking it was going to be all like this, and then printed in the Comics Journal.
That's the thing that I come back to, and then dismissed by Marvel a month after this is published.
Right,
I believe is the timeline. I could imagine freelancers showing up and being like, "I want the Chris Claremont, Bill Mantlo
absolutely,"
deal," which would be a headache for whoever has to, tell them no,
yeah.
or go upstairs and beg for money and benefits and savings plans and all of this stuff. Yeah, it's a peculiar document all around. I'm really happy that this has come up. I like reading this stuff. I look forward to reading more of them. All the ones you mentioned sound good to me, and I'm sure there's many more. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people with these different depositions. I'm kind of surprised by the volume of these things that are available. But you mentioned names like Stan Lee and Todd McFarlane. Jack Kirby's probably in there somewhere, possibly connected to the Stan Lee one. These are important, huge figures in comics history, and to have like under oath records of them talking about the comics industry, I find this stuff, I could read this stuff forever. It's like the greatest comics interviews ever.
Yeah, because they have to, they can have a little salesmanship here and there, but perjury is an issue. Like, you have to be above board, and some of the fun of this Jim Shooter piece is just him tiptoeing and skating around saying what is very clear, the correct answer or whatever. I want to put a couple things out to the Kayfabe audience to drop in the comments of this video, man, because we create the videos, and editing them takes a lot of time. Isn't necessarily much extra time that we can devote to each of these things. So I want some people to run some of those Chris Claremont, Bill Mantlo, Larry Hama numbers through a modern day inflation calculator, those figures we gave, 230,000, something like that. Let's, for the hell of it, say that's the 1986 figure for these guys. So let's see what that is. It's got to be over $1 million, or close to it. And in the comments, please let us know what future depositions you want us to read after all the stuff that we just laid out here. We could go in a million directions. We could go to the Todd McFarlane. Stan Lee's a big name. It makes sense to get some of that on the record. Why not? But we'll let the comments pick it for us. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Good to go?
I am.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available. What's out there, Jimmy?
Hulk Grand Design. Tell your local comic shop to order 4 variant covers and all. Tell them to order 4 copies for you. I'm trying to get those pre-order numbers up there, so let's show Marvel what the Kayfabe effect is all about, and right now is the time to do that. Pre-orders are how these comics are sold, so let your comic shop know that you want this book. Even if it's a good shop and you usually buy off the shelf, let them know that you want this book. Put it in your subscriber box, pre-order it if necessary, and pick the cover that you like. You can follow me on patreon.com/JimRugg, where I am working on sort of the process zine for the Hulk. So check that out if you want to see how this is made, if you want to see some of my original art process, index cards, the whole kind of backstory of how this comic came to be. You can join me on Patreon for that.
Red Room, the Antisocial Network, in stores today. Get your hands on a copy. Thank you so much for really getting those numbers up there. Man, I saw a lot of these comics as gifts to very, very sick individuals on December 25th, and that was a sight to behold. That was the 2021 season of Red Room Comics. It's 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. And the trigger warnings round of Red Room Comics is going to be coming out beginning actually in March now, March 9th, the week before Hulk Grand Design comes out. The first issue of Red Room Trigger Warnings is coming out. There was a ransomware attack at the distributor when we were getting those final orders in, so the cutoff happened before the stores were able to adjust their orders, which proved very, very valuable to us. Like the first go round, like Red Room would always be super high on these like reorder lists right at final order cutoff, and we didn't have that opportunity because all the retailers thought they were going to have that chance, as they do with every other comic every month. What I'm saying is that might be a rare number one that is going to be out there on the stands, and I want to see it disappear day one. That would be freaking awesome. Going to be coming out on a monthly basis. Every issue completely self-contained, so you're going to get a full story. If you see any Red Room comics, just scoop it up, give it a shot. If you dig it, grab another one. All those comics are serialized on my Patreon before they hit paper, though. Jimmy and I have link trees in the description below this video where you can get to all of that material. What else?
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter, also at the links below this video, and you can find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts and merchandise at the links below this video.
Give them those marching orders, Jimmy. We're going to be on our way.
Read more comics.
And stay the hell out of court.